You are listening to Good Morning Sunshine, where we authentically share the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beauty all around it, reminding you that perspective reveals miracles. Good morning, sunshines. Callie Carroll here. We are diving into the third agreement of Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements. Do you guys know there's a fifth agreement too? We should probably do that next month. But anyways, we're going to talk about the third agreement, which I don't know why it's my favorite agreement to go through and see the realizations that come across people's faces and lives and hearts when they see what assumptions really do in their world. And I also love it because we've talked about the first agreement of the impeccability of our word. We've talked about the second agreement of how we take things personally, but really the making assumptions, all three of those flow so seamlessly together that it's hard to have one without the other. And now since we've done the other two, I really feel like I can wrap my brain and my words around all three of those things. So if you haven't watched the first two or listened to the first two or read the book, The Four Agreements, I recommend doing that, right? So you can really catch up. And you can still listen to this and you can go back afterwards and come back and it all makes sense together. So today is all about assumptions. And I think for most of us, we've heard the quote, making an assumption makes an ass out of you and me. And we might say that in passing, but very few times do we see it showing up in our lives when in reality, it shows up literally all of the time. And I always love to, in my conversations, encourage you guys to, like, after you listen and take it in, really do some inventory in your life, in your world, and just start to be aware and intentional about looking for those things and be like, oh wow, I make assumptions all of the time. Just all of the time. Here's a great assumption because it's funny and it's just relevant and it's right now. I assume that the world should know that when it's 80 degrees outside, when you walk inside, you don't want to have to put on a parka and it shouldn't be 68 degrees. Like one of the things I don't like doing or I don't like about going on vacation to like Florida or different tropical places is because you're so warm when you're outside and you come inside and it's freezing as cold. Let's just go with that again, right? And I assume like you should know that that's not what the human experience is. That's not what we like. But the fact of the matter is, that's my personal agreement, my personal decision, my word with myself is that if it's that hot outside, I know that I'm going to be cold if the temperature's too low. So I assume that everybody should know that you don't change the thermostat in my house in the summer down to 70. I just assume that you know that. And I think this is such a funny example because all of us have these different, I think little like spats, many of us do, about the temperature of our abodes, which let's edify and give gratitude for the fact that I don't know, for all of us that are feeling the same thing right now, that we actually can control the temperature of our home, that we have air conditioners and heaters to do that when there's so many people in the world who do not have the opportunity for that experience. Like, how freaking lucky are we that we get to fight about what temperature should be inside? Yesterday was Father's Day as I'm recording this, and I actually went through and I polled everybody there. And I was like, let's just do a poll and let's really see what your opinions are about this. And interestingly enough, and obviously enough, I had the answer. Like in the summer, it should be 74 inside. And in the winter, it should be 68 inside. That's what I know to be true. That's what I think. That's what I enjoy. I asked my dad the question and he didn't hear my answer first. His is the exact same answer. Exact same answer. And of course, when we look at our programming, this was from like, we didn't even like do the first chapter before the four agreements, but we have been programmed since we were children from all the different people who influence our life, whether that's parents and teachers and coaches. And now we're influenced all over the place through social media and places that we're exposed, people that we're exposed to. But anyways, that makes sense that would be my personal exposure. That would be my assumption that everybody should know that's just the way it is. And then all of the other answers around the table, we varied all over the board. And it was just an entertaining conversation and such a light and fun example about how we have a certain standard expectation and assumption that everybody else should like it the same way and should know that that's how we like it. One of my favorite ways to talk about this agreement and making assumptions, because again, it happens all of the time, is in communication between significant others. And for some reason, there's something within most of us, like let's just go with the women, okay? We expect our other half to know exactly what we want for the upcoming holiday. They should know that this is what I want for Valentine's Day or for my birthday, or they should know that I like big celebrations and I want to be recognized all month, or they should know that I don't want roses on Valentine's Day, but I want them every other day of the year, or they should know that I don't really like jewelry, or that I love jewelry, or that I'm expecting this. They should know that I want time without the kids on Mother's Day instead of times with the kids, or that I want to be gardening, or that I don't want to be gardening because I don't want to be doing work. But they should know we've been married for 2 years. We've been married for 15 years. We've been married for 40 years. They should know. And instead of communicating it, I'm just going to make an assumption that you are going to do it that way and that you understand that my agreement is this. And instead of communicating it when you don't show up how I want you to show up, I'm going to bitch about it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be upset. You're going to get the silent treatment. I'm going to tell you how you did it wrong. And all of a sudden, it creates this conflict because we make an assumption about how the other person should show up. We assume that they should be able to read our minds, and when they don't, we take it personally. And all of a sudden we're like, well, I guess he doesn't love me. I guess he hasn't paid attention. I know I said this last year that this is what I wanted. He doesn't remember. It's only been 364 days. Why doesn't he remember that? I set out a magazine and I opened it to a certain page. He didn't see that. He didn't notice that. What? He must not love me. He must not be paying attention. I must not be valuable enough. I'm not worthy enough. And all of a sudden, our chosen agreements and beliefs, limiting or empowering, like our chosen agreements that we have with ourselves, they come to light. And that's how all three of these things work together so well. And you see how they interact so much, right? Because when you have an agreement, whatever it is, that you are unworthy of love, and you've made that agreement based upon your past and conditions, and you haven't addressed it and you haven't decided to work through it. You've just decided. And even if you're like, I didn't decide to own that, you did, because you did not decide. You didn't decide not to, right? So because of inaction is still action. So you've decided that you're unworthy. And now everything you're going to assume that every way that other people show up is because you're unworthy, and then you're going to take that personally. Like that this is actually a really good example. Like, so your friend doesn't call you every single week, and that hurts your feelings because you want to talk every week, but you didn't really tell them that, hey, like I have an expectation of talking every week. And sometimes those, like, people don't want to have those conversations because it's like, wow, this is confronting, because conversations are confronting. And we realize that we are different people with different expectations, and we have to figure out how to make things work. That's what strong relationships are. It's figuring out, you want this and I want this, and you're not wrong and I'm not wrong, and you're not right and I'm not right. We're just different. So how can we manipulate these things and maneuver in a way that works and feels good for both of us, realizing that it's not because we love one another any less, but it's just the way it is. So instead, you're like, but I want them to call me every week, but they never do. And you all of a sudden have this assumption that they've moved on. They have a new friend that they like more than you. I saw they posted a picture of them and so on their Facebook, and they must be hanging out with them all the time. And it's probably because you did something wrong. Wait, did you bring the wrong dish to the last get together, or did you say something incorrectly on your last talk? Did you upset them some way? And all of a sudden you make all these assumptions. And I really see these assumptions as like this wild storyboard where you make up this story completely about what's going on in the other person's world. You don't ask them. You don't like, you don't like say, hey, I noticed that you didn't call me on Wednesday. And you also posted that picture of you and Shirley. Like, are things good between us, or what's going on? What's happening in your world? Nope. You're just going to be like, they don't like hanging out with me. It's probably because I did this. And there's a whole story arises in your brain. And all of a sudden 2 years pass and you're no longer friends with that person. You're like, I don't really know what happened. It's because you made an assumption, you took it personally, and it was affirming the word that you have chosen of your unworthiness, your not enoughness, and you made that true. And on the same light, on their end, they're probably like, they're in their own little world, their little world of wonder. And they probably have their own assumptions about, wait, but why didn't she like notice that when I posted that post about Shirley, that I really said that, I miss all my friends, but I'm excited to have this new friend. And I was talking about them and that I was missing them. And you made the assumption that they would notice and they were supposed to call you and be like, oh, that was so sweet that you said that. I know you were directing it towards me. Like, can you see where I'm going with this? It's so wildly like made up in our brains, and we write these stories, we create these stories, we make these assumptions all of the time so that we can take them personally and validate what our innermost beliefs are. To me, that's really what the four agreements comes down to, even though we have the best agreement coming up. Punny, if you guys know the agreements, still. But if not, that's okay, you guys. Just listen to the next one. It's fine. But we have this, the four agreements, really looking at it is that you have a deep rooted internal belief, which is your word. And that word, which you continue to choose every single day, that agreement of your word that you've made, that you are patient, or that you are loved, or that you are successful, or that you attract abundance, or that you are unworthy, that you are obnoxious, that you are too loud, that you are too much, that you are dumb. That's a good one to actually go into. I haven't thought about this for a minute. The too loud, I've heard this a lot in my coaching programs where someone feels like they've been told they're too much, they're too loud, which by the way, I'm told all the time. I mean, not directly, but like the comment of my loudness and my bigness is it's something that's brought to light on a regular basis. And maybe that has been for you. And the thing is, I guess for me, when I see my agreement, there's no TOO in front of the loud or big or wild or spazzy or crazy or all these different adjectives. It's not a TOO. It's just a loud. It's just a big. And the reason why that's an agreement to myself is because I have not made an agreement that that's a negative trait. Not at all. I'm not make that that is not agreement that I choose to have because I've I've taken some time, and I actually look forward to doing this again because it's been a while since I've done it. I've taken some time to address what I want my internal impeccability of my word is, impeccability without sin to yourself, what that word is to myself. And being loud isn't a crime. Being loud doesn't hurt other people. Being loud isn't being ill towards my neighbors, right? Like being loud is just a way of being. Same way that just because you're quiet or you're soft, that's not, oh, she's too quiet. She's too reserved. She's too introverted. That's not a thing, you guys. That's not a thing. There's no TOO in front of that. If you're quiet and you enjoy being quiet, what a beautiful trait to have because we are all different. And if we were all the same, what a shitty place this would be to be. The thing is, it's in the learning to communicate and express and receive the fact that we are different and that that is okay and that one is not better than the other. And when we can really validate our own internal agreements with ourselves first, then what can happen is with those other people around us, we show up with the strength and confidence and conviction that we stop making assumptions about other ways of being or showing up to life. And then we don't take it personally and everything just gets easier. This is why Don Miguel Ruiz talks about how when you practice the four agreements, you can find heaven even amidst hell. Like you can find joy even when things just like all this stuff is going on, all these different, battles and pieces. And you can actually find peace and joy in the middle of it when you have such strong internal conviction as well as love. And when I say that, I could see someone perceiving it as this. They're like, oh, but you're so convicted in the fact that being loud is okay. Okay. And that's not how I see it. And like, so you think you're better than me because you think you know that. That's a full story you just made up. That's a full assumption you just made up. That's the full example of the first three agreements, that because I said one thing, you received it another way, and then you took it personally because your word is different. So it's acknowledging, to me, this is part of it. It's acknowledging that even though our different personal agreements, as long as they're made with love, right? As long as they're made with love, are not meant to make anybody else feel lesser than because it's different than what another's agreement is. Does that make sense? Now, there is an exception to that, because if you're making agreements with your life and yourself and your being and your family and your world that are not positively supporting you and them, then you're making an agreement for negative. You're making agreements that are damaging. You're making agreements that maybe directly physically damaging or mentally damaging. Like you have an agreement that you should you should bully others because that's going to make you bigger. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Remember, impeccability of word, there's word. Impeccability of word is word that's not sinning against yourself. It's word of love and positivity only. So if you've gone through and you've looked at what your current agreements are and they're not with love, they're not with light, they're not with positive emotion, then that's not the conviction that I'm talking about. So, reviewing those and stepping into your most interpersonal relationship and figuring out what you want to remove that's not serving you with light and love, and holding on to what is, that's where it really all gets beautiful. And I feel like that was kind of like all over the board there for a second, but the point of that being is that these three agreements, they intertwine in such a way that as you walk through your life over the next week or month or year, or when you're caught up in a challenging situation, this is how the four agreements shows up for me a lot, is when I feel that emotional charge, I have to take a step back and I'm like, okay, why am I charged? Oh, four agreements. Let's see, which one of my agreements am I breaking right now? Did I make an assumption? The answer is usually yes, I did. Right? I thought that so and so said this or didn't show up or whatever. And when I made that assumption, I created an entire story, and then I took it personally because of which deep rooted agreement personally do I want to take a look at, and is that serving me? And I'll go through that practice in my life when I feel that the jerk, right? And as you start to get more and more familiar with your agreements, and especially as the people in your world are exposed to the agreements, what's so beautiful about that is because you can have conversations with it. Like my daughter, she speaks the four agreements. So we can talk about situations or things at school, and she can identify. She's like, oh, I probably don't want to do that because I'm making an assumption, and I'll do the same thing. Or, you know what, I don't even want to share or talk about that because that's using gossip, and that's not using my word in its positive light. That's not what word is meant for. So let's move on to a different subject that's going to be positive, encouraging. And we know when you have more people in your world who are exposed to these things, that it's even easier to live in them. And it's also easier because they stop making assumptions about your actions. They stop personifying everything. They stop taking it personally and feeling their own wounds stab, because they're able to let go of some of those old wounds. They're able to step into that development. And here's, I think, a really great place to bring all of this, because some of you guys have noticed, or you will notice in the future, that when you've made the decision to start to develop yourself personally, and you're stepping into a space of the four agreements, you'll start to notice the people around you who don't practice them at all. And it's not going to make you feel like you're taking it personally, but it might make you feel a little yucky when you see people I don't want to say mismanaging, but like uh putting themselves down and taking on agreements that aren't the true that aren't the best to them, going into our fourth agreement, right? Like when they're taking on that agreement, you're like, oh, that just makes me sad that they have that scarcity mindset, and they never think that they're going to be able to support their family. And because of that, they're creating it and it's happening. And I just wish that they just could make a new agreement with themselves. And it makes you feel like that. And then when you see people make assumptions, like it just it starts to drive you crazy. You're kind of like, I don't know. Like Maybe that's the truth, but have you asked them, or did you just make up that entire scenario in your head? Maybe it'd be better just like reach out and just ask them and see if that's the truth of what's going on. And even if it is the truth, how's that going to make you feel? Like, is that going to be okay? Can you move on? Can you move through that? And are we just maybe we're just taking things personally? And man, one of the biggest things for me in stepping into a life of the four agreements and working on our personal development is when we see other people gossip or hold negative emotions towards others. And it's just like, I don't know, when I'm in a space of gossip or negative emotions or negative conversation, I often just remove myself. Maybe I have to go to the bathroom all of a sudden, or I'm really thirsty and I need to grab some water, or I'm like, oh, what's that noise? I remove myself. And it's because I don't feel the need to like preach or post myself a lot of the times, right? Which I know that we do need to take a stance to changing the world. And I don't want to make them feel bad about themselves. I probably need to reflect upon that actually, now that I'm saying it out loud. But I don't want to expose myself to that either because I know that it's not positive. The thing that I have done on a proactive side, I'll give another great example. I think it's a great example is I've preemptively set up my expectations with relationships and friendships to acknowledge that I I enjoy this, I don't enjoy this. And that way if they're not in alignment or agreement with me, we can just part ways right in the beginning. So I've just found this new incredible group of friends over the last few weeks. And one of the first things that I said is like we had hung out for an evening, we had a lot of fun, and I made sure that I made the audible comment. Let's see who received it, right? And said something along the lines of, I'm really excited to have made these connections because I probably have a more limited group of friendships because I don't allow for gossip in my world. I said those words. Like I don't if people are going to be in that space that they can be there, but I'm going to remove myself. And like the people who want to pursue a friendship, I know they heard it because they even said something at later encounters where it's like, I'm with you, same thing. Like I'm looking for a group of women who are going to support each other and love each other through our imperfections. And as we are, and not be gossiping or bringing down or pulling in negative energy, and stating that beforehand, I feel is such a supportive way to make sure that we're stepping into relationships that are going to help us with those chosen positive confirmation, agreements, beliefs about ourselves, those deep rooted ones that we went through in the very first agreement. And it's going to help support create those in our world. So, as we step away from today's conversation about assumptions, because again, I feel like this is kind of all over the board because there's so many different things that come about, and because I'm me, and that's okay, right? Is the first thing is that like seeing how you make assumptions throughout your day. See the stories that you make up. And man, we are good storytellers. You probably have stories about why something is the way it is all over the board. There's a story about why your marriage is the way that it is, that it hasn't been communicated. There's a story about why this friendship is and why this friendship isn't, and why your relationship with your parents are this way, and what you've got so many wild stories that you've made up without having direct communication. And just look at it. Just see it and don't judge yourself for it because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And then you can just like step back and be like, isn't that interesting? You're right, Cal. Like but I'm not right. Don Miguel Ruiz, you're right. Like I have been writing a complete story and making assumptions because I think that they should be able to read my mind when in fact they can't. I don't know very many mind readers, right? And if you read it, you're probably reading into it even as such. So they don't know, so they show up how they think they should show up based upon all of the agreements they've made and all the different ways they've been conditioned, and they're just doing their best. So I'm over here making assumptions, taking things personally, and letting it negatively affect my life, and it keeps sucking me down. But the cool thing is I don't have to do that anymore. I don't if you want to know something, if I want to know why that person's not in my life anymore and I still have a hurt or wounded soul because of it, I'm just going to reach out and see. Maybe we are guys, we are different. There's different people out there. We're not all meant to be best friends. You guys know that, right? Some people are going to show up in different ways, and that loud person really is obnoxious to you. No problem. don't choose to be around the loud person that much. It doesn't mean that they're bad because they're loud. It just means that you guys aren't a perfect fit. We're not, that'd be so weird if we were all perfect fits, wouldn't it be? So we don't judge each other for the way they show up, and we don't take it personally that what we're doing is wrong. Instead, we're like, yo, you're different. I'm different. Does this work? Does this not work? It's going to work differently in different chapters of our lives. It's going to work one way when we're 20, a different way when we're 30, a different way when we have kids or little kids or old kids or teenagers or empty nesters. And there's going to be different ways as we develop and we progress and we have different types of careers and we dive into personal development or different reading or different interests. Relationships change, relationships grow, and all of that is well and fine as long as we're not taking it personally and assuming that, oh, they left because this is because of me, because I'm not worthy of it, or they always leave. That's not the case. And when we get to see that and really connect with the fact that we have different chapters and we are all imperfectly perfect and we are or perfectly imperfect, whichever one, we are all different and unique, and that we don't all have to be in this one beautiful mesh. Instead, we can do our own things, and you can like yellow and I can like teal, just like last week's example, and that's perfectly okay. We just decide, do we still want to hang out? It makes relationships and communication so much easier when we stop writing stories about what we assume the other person is doing, and we make all of this shit up in our own brains and they make it up about us, and that is just exhausting. Do I see how that's exhausting? So as we step away from today's conversation, my encouragement would be, number one, just acknowledge again as you walk through life where you're making assumptions, where you're writing stories, and then after that, you get to decide, do I want to continue on without the communication? Is it one of such as just like, you know what? Actually, I don't know if that's the truth. I did just make up a story, but we haven't been talking as much, and I'm okay with that. And so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep, and that's perfect, right? Or maybe you're like, you know what? I don't really know why it's like this, and I really do want things to shift, or maybe it could be different. Then reach out and ask the question. There, it might be a yes or a no, but at least you ask. You're like, but I don't want to ask because then they're going to think that I'm confrontational and they'll think that I'm like showing up. You're writing a story just in your own communication, like your own internal story is battling itself, right? So see where you're making assumptions. Look at your different relationships and instances in your life and decide, do I want to communicate more clearly about this? Would I like to tell my spouse what I would like to have for our next holiday or for the next upcoming whatever? Or do I want to let him guess? And when he doesn't get me what I want, instead of being angry, I'm going to be like, well, but you didn't communicate it. You did open the magazine to page 8 and put it out in the bathroom. That doesn't count as communicating. Communication is clear and concise, right? Without question, without doubt. Here is how it is. Which way do you want to communicate it? Do you want to leave room for assumptions? And then the final thing today is just taking a look at all three of agreements together in your life and starting to just become more comfortable and aware of where you're at in your agreements. And, do you have different areas that make you feel a little uncomfortable that you would like to work on, that you would like to shift, where you would like to see and find a new perspective? Maybe you've always had that scarcity mindset, but you're like, I don't want to have that anymore. You have the availability to make a different internal personal agreement with your words you choose, because your words will create your reality. And the more that you choose the words and you reiterate the words, you're going to find more of that. And then all of a sudden, your old assumptions, the way you used to take things personally, are not going to affect you anymore, because they're going to disappear. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens with time. It happens with practice. It happens with acknowledgement. It happens with knowing, like, I don't like this piece about my life. I think that this piece could improve. I love this one, so I'm going to embrace it. And that's how we're going to start to see the shift. Make sense? So we're only on the third agreement. I know you're thinking, wow, there's so many of these. It's great. We'll talk about doing our best in the next one here. Make sure you catch up if you haven't done that. And why are you here, Callie? I'm here because I'm on a mission to ignite smiles, to support people in finding a new perspective, to find joy through the highs and the lows, to find passion and presence, and to build positive personal relationships. And I just really want to help. I really just want to help. So that's all I have for today, you guys. Don't forget that perspective reveals miracles. And I love y'all. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for joining. And don't forget to subscribe. And of course, share with your friends. Guys, that's how we impact more lives. All right. See you next time.